Welcome to house church. What happens when frogs park illegally? They get towed. Why can't motorcycles hold themselves up? They're too tired. And where do dogs park their cars? In the barking lot.
A man who runs behind a car will get exhausted, but a man who runs in front of a car will get tired. My friend uses concrete and asphalt interchangeably. He says it's just a matter of semantics. Passed a road sign that said uneven pavement. I looked at Todd and said, "That's odd."
I just met someone who was a steamroller operator. He was such a flatterer. Have you heard my under construction joke? It's not done yet.
Now, I know I'm not the best at parking, but today I crossed the line. Parking a single car doesn't require much space, but now parking 200 cars, that requires a lot.
Hear these words from Matthew. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. This is the word of life. Thanks be to God.
Some of the Anabaptists of the 16th century had a very literal take on the words of Jesus from the Sermon on the Mount. If the salt loses its saltiness, it is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. Well, at the end of the service, they would have some of the Christians among them that had lost their saltiness lay down at the threshold of the door. And the rest of the congregation, as they were leaving the service, would then walk on top of them, those people who had lost their saltiness. I don't know how they decided who would trample and who would be trampled, but it certainly made a point. Tasteless Christians were good for nothing. Sounds scary to me, but I'm kind of impressed by it anyway. I can't imagine doing something like that in church. Of course, we have to be really careful of literal translations of pretty much anything, especially when Jesus is telling stories. But symbolism and story, they get our attention. And in this snippet that you heard today, Jesus says that we need to be salty. And then he says that we can't hide our light. We've got to let it shine. When I was a kid, that light part made a lot of sense. If you put a candle underneath something, it would light on fire or go out. Well, in the dark, it sometimes scared me, so it didn't take too long to understand that, light was good. And over time, as symbolism and abstract thinking began to come together in my brain, it wasn't too far-fetched to talk about our good works and our giftedness as our light and how we shared our light in the world. But salt was a little bit harder. Salt to me looked an awful lot like sugar. Peter and I were watching the Great British Baking Show the other night. Oh my word, what a funny show. And one of the bakers suddenly worried that she had put salt in her cake rather than sugar. And we were like, oh, because we remember the time when I forgot the sugar in my pumpkin pie for Thanksgiving. It wasn't a good night. Those of you who remember that we also didn't have butter growing up in my house must think we're pretty strange, because growing up we never had salt either. My parents, when they would have somebody over who would ask for salt and pepper, my mother would get all nervous and go looking for it and come back empty-handed because she had nothing. And so because of this, I really didn't understand what Jesus meant when he said something about saltiness, right? He never says, if you lose your sweetness, you are no good. Dang. No, he says, if you lose your saltiness, we're no good. So I want to keep this short, hoping that those of you who are eating together today can share an important time together. And those of you who are either watching alone or with another person will have plenty to talk about, and you can discuss it all. I'm going to suggest a few things today that might get you thinking, and then I'll leave you with a challenge. So salt adds flavor, not sweet, but almost like a zing at times. It doesn't add heat, but it enhances everything else. Any chef will tell you that if you leave out the salt, you also miss out on other flavors as well. And so, being a salty Christian means there are times when we need to be explicit and say something to someone, not just let something go or keep the situation bland or status quo. Sometimes being salt in the world means that we have to stand up for what is right in the face of injustice. Often it means that we need to add our power or might or support in order to increase the power of someone else's voice. Being a salty Christian means that you matter in the world, for salt is essential for life. Salt preserves, it keeps things from going bad. Salt enhances and it even alters the flavor of food. But salt also heals, especially back in the day when Jesus was speaking and giving this story. But salt, you think about that, saline solution, it's life-saving for almost anyone who has ever landed in the hospital. Salt is crucial to life, and it does its work in very quiet ways. Most of the time we cannot even see salt. It is dissolved into solutions in food or on roadways, even into Play-Doh, but rarely do we see it. We experience it. It reminds me of a famous Francis of Assisi quote that is often attributed to Mother Teresa: preach the gospel at all times, and if necessary, use words. So maybe I should be quiet now and let you think this one out for yourself. I should probably finish up so you can preach the gospel without words. But my challenge to you this week: shine your light, do the thing that uses your gifts, uses your kindness in any way possible. Don't hide it. But then think carefully about your saltiness and do something that proves but you haven't lost it. Often I think we have to push ourselves outside our comfort zones to restore that saltiness. We have to try doing something that Jesus commanded, perhaps something spontaneous, helping someone who needs it, or even something planned like having people over for brunch on a Sunday morning when you have no idea at all who is going to sign up. Oh, 12 of you did that today, didn't you? Good job! But really, Jesus told us that we will do far greater things than he ever did. And our saltiness and our light makes this happen. Be salty this week. Amen. Friends, for those of you gathered together at someone's house, please enjoy your time together. Remember, unless your host says something specific about it, please remember to leave by 11:30, because that was the plan today, 10 to 11:30, just kind of like church in that sense. It will be very good to see you all back at church next Sunday on a brand new parking lot. I hope you've enjoyed the pictures this week. For those of you who are not gathered together with someone else, but you're still watching or listening, thank you for taking part in our church out of the building experience. It's a little strange to be meeting this way, but maybe getting out of the church helps us remember what Jesus really was preaching today. Be salty. Shine your light all over the world. Amen.